So the Pentagon gave some details here on Operation Epic Fury. In terms of where it can go next, I was struck by the fact that the defense secretary's words were, "We have only just begun this fight." What did you take away from what we learned?
Yeah, that's right, Savannah. Look, we're hearing from the administration that this war is escalating. They are not pulling back. As you mentioned, the Secretary of Defense trying to sell this to the American public, trying to boost morale as well, saying that we are winning, he says. Without mercy, they are toast, and they know it. Now, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs also saying that the operation would expand inland. I thought that was significant, something we have been hearing about for the last day or so, but he's confirming that now more of this operation will target the interior portion of Iran. Now, certainly, the defense secretary also confirming that the U.S. targeted an Iranian ship in international waters, that a submarine hit that ship. So far, this operation is continuing. And it also comes as the Secretary of Defense, Savannah, tried to push back against the notion that Israel dragged the U.S. into this war. That's something that we've been hearing about for the last day or so, with Secretary Rubio yesterday as he briefed lawmakers on Capitol Hill, walking back comments that he made on Monday, seeming to suggest that the reason the U.S. went into this war now was because the U.S. knew that Israel was preparing to strike Iran, that they had concerns about Iranian retaliation against Israel and the U.S., and so that's why the U.S. took this preemptive strike. That, of course, has led to criticism from Democrats that it is Israel driving U.S. foreign policy. The president yesterday strongly rejected that and said that it was he who perhaps forced Israel's hand. But certainly a lot of mixed messaging here coming from the administration, but Secretary Hegseth trying to make the case this morning that the U.S. is not only winning this war, but it plans to increase the pace of it. And he also refused to put any certain timeline on this, saying it could be 4 weeks, as the president has laid out before. It could be longer, 6 weeks, or even 3. Pushing back against any suggestion that U.S. officials needed to provide a stronger timeline or more details about operations here. Also, one last point, Savannah. Notice that there were no charts, no maps, no specifics laid out in this news briefing, as perhaps we saw in previous military operations decades ago during the Gulf War. But Secretary Hegseth essentially saying, trust us, we're winning on this one.
And some of those details that he gave, Gabe, were saying that uncontested airspace, that America has complete control of the skies over Iran, discussing this sharp decrease in Iran's firing back from on the ground, also mentioning sinking a good portion of the Navy. Tell us about these military successes that the Secretary of Defense mentioned.
That's right. Hegseth saying that since the beginning of this conflict over the weekend, since the beginning of the war, Iran is now firing 86% less missiles, pointing to that as evidence that the U.S. military is achieving success when it comes to knocking out its capabilities, annihilating its Navy as well. That's one of the objectives that President Trump has laid out, in addition to trying to prevent Iran from achieving a nuclear weapon and wiping out its ballistic missile program. Those are just some of the objectives that the president has laid out. Critics of this administration have said, well, the military objectives are one thing, but the political objectives, if there are any, remain far murkier. The question now, what happens next with the leadership of Iran? The president suggesting yesterday, he was asked about what would a worst-case scenario be in this conflict, and the president said it's possible that whoever replaces the supreme leader could be as bad or worse, and that it would be a worst-case scenario to find out in 5 years that was the case. So certainly a lot of unanswered questions about the political objectives here, but Secretary Hegseth really trying to sell this so far what the American military has done, the military objectives, saying that the U.S. is well on its way to achieving those, Savannah.
Gabe, before I let you go, I do want to ask about our fallen heroes. We got a little bit of information there about the 6 men and women who lost their lives so far in this conflict.
Oh, well, certainly. And look, this is something we're just starting to, learn the names of the fallen, 6 so far. And Secretary Hegseth struck a very solemn tone when speaking about them. And this is something that the president himself has braced the American people for. And Secretary Hegseth, once again, this morning, said that it is a possibility as this conflict ramps up. You see there the Pentagon releasing the pictures and names of some of these service men and women who have been killed in action. This is obviously a very difficult part of this war, something that many of the president's supporters in his base wanted to voted against, essentially. The president campaigned on the idea of no more extended foreign wars. Now, it was interesting to hear Secretary Hegseth today during his comments making the case that this was America first, that this was in line with the president's promises during the campaign. And when you speak with White House officials and administration officials, they do try to argue that the president is trying to achieve peace through strength here. Certainly many Democrats on Capitol Hill, especially after getting that briefing from Secretary Rubio and other top administration officials yesterday, they argue that they are not confident that the administration has a specific plan when it comes to these political objectives, and they fear that they could see many more American casualties as this war drags on. Savannah.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez from Washington, D.C. for us. Thank you very much.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.